to talk quickly about fears and phobias. Now, these are sort of the two main areas that I started out when I was practicing as a hypnotherapist, and they're some of the most successful sort of journeys that I have with clients, and probably the most consistent. So I felt it was time to give them their due. Now, for me, fears and phobias are the same thing at slightly different levels. So your fears, so if you're fearful of spiders or dogs or flying, typically fears will tend to be something physical. They'll tend to be something that is something you would naturally just avoid, whereas phobias tend to take it a little bit further. Now, the response will be very similar, so you'll still have that kind of fight, flight, freeze response. Your heart will start pumping, your hands will shake, you'll sort of go into lockdown for a little minute. But typically with the phobia, it can be triggered by what we call attached stimulus responses. So not necessarily just the thing. So if you have a phobia of dogs, you might, for example, see a bike chain, and that might look like a dog's lead, and that might be enough to trigger it. You may have a strong phobia of flying and see someone with a particular belt buckle that looks like the buckles that you have on airplane, and that will be enough to set that off. So typically you'll find that if it gets to a phobic level, you'll start to have attached stimulus responses as well. So that's other things other than just the fear itself that will cause you to have that response. Now, typically when I'm working with hypnosis, the way that I will address a fear or a phobia is usually by, first of all, dissociating you from the fear and removing that connection. So we would do that through sort of like mental rehearsal, going back and replaying over sort of one of your experiences of that fear, but with a slightly different angle. So we'll look at different ways and different scenes, different options to change and sort of mess about with that particular memory. And then we'll sort of give it a good shake around, and usually that's enough to kind of shake things away. Typically, fears tend to be set at quite a young age. So they are learned behaviours that start when we're quite young, and then over time we learn and we relearn and we keep teaching ourselves to follow that sort of fear response. So if you think of, we'll use spiders for example. If you're scared of spiders, it's likely that when you were quite young, you or a parent saw a spider. Typically the parent would have had the sort of fear response. They were the ones who would have popped or screamed or picked you up and hugged you. And that's enough for your mind at that point to learn that spiders must be bad because spiders worried mum or dad or whoever it was. So we learn. And then the next time we see a spider, we think, it's a spider. What do I know about spiders? Well, I know they scared mum last time, or dad. Right, so the spiders must be scary. I must need to be scared of spiders. So you have the same response. And the first time it's a mirrored response. So typically you'll find that you'll scream, you'll run away, you'll hide, you'll go for a hug with that parent. And then every consecutive time that you see another spider, it then compounds. So it gets reinforced and relearned. Now, what can happen as a cause of that is that behaviour becomes so ingrained that it's the default response. So that even just looking at the picture of a spider, there's that fear, there's the heart going, there's that sort of shortness of breath, the hands start shaking a little bit. And this is the same with any fear. I'm only using spiders as an example. So what we do is we dissociate you from that initial event. That's what we refer to as an ISE, or an initial sensitizing event. Then, once we've dealt with that initial event, because we want to go all the way back to that first one, we can deal with the other ones as well, but if we get this at the root, we pull everything else out with it. And I'll use a combination of techniques then. I'll use a little bit of hypnosis or traditional hypnotherapy. I'll use some of the techniques that I've learned and adapted from other therapists, from other forms of therapy, not necessarily just hypnosis. And what we'll do is we'll change the way that that program's running. So that learned behavior then becomes sort of an automated program that we just run. Spider fear response, spider fear response. Well, we'll change that, we'll shake it around and we'll give it something else to do. And then we'll rerun the stimulus. So I might show my client a picture of a spider on my phone and I'll see what they do. If they don't have that initial jerk response, then we've gotten rid of it. And then it's just about sanding the edges off and smoothing things around. And it's the same with phobias. It's just typically because phobias can have multiple different triggers, it's about finding the root trigger, that initial sensitizing event going all the way back. And then we can just remove it root and stem. So when we're talking about the different kinds of fears and phobias that people have, we have to remember, as these are learned behaviors, we can unlearn them. It just takes a little bit of time. If you think about the first time you learned to do something, whether it's a hobby or a skill or even driving your car, learning to walk, you weren't very good the first time and you fell down, and then you had to sort of relearn and keep repeating that behavior, and then over time and repetition you got better at it. If you have a fear or a phobia, you have gotten really good at having that fear or phobia. And in most cases, and again this is a generalization, not true for everyone, but in most cases that fear or phobia will probably have been learned through association to someone else and is not based on any actual physical threat or danger. Typically as well, living in the UK as we do, most of the spiders you're likely to encounter are not going to harm you in some way. Okay? They're not. They might be big, they might be nasty, but they're not actually going to hurt you. And a lot of times they actually do a really important job. They get rid of all the other little bugs and insects and stuff that clutter up your home. But it's about changing that perception and just reminding yourself of that. It's really hard to do when you're in the moment and you've got that fear response, but it's really, really easy to do once we've created this dissociation from that sort of anxiety, that fear response firing off. And then, as I say, we just go in and test and calibrate. And this is something that I think is so important. It's something that I learned from not just my trainers, my mentors in the therapy world, but also from my professional life and the other jobs that I've done. You have to test and adjust. You've got to go in and tweak. I want you to go and find where it's not quite fixed, and then we'll fix it there. So we will do lots of little calibration during the sessions, and we'll get it to sort of keep repeating that process until it sticks. But we'll do it in, it's kind of like when you restart your computer in safe mode. Kind of just put your mind into safe mode so that you're not feeling that feeling, you're not having that fire off. Once we've got rid of that association, then we can run the pattern and we can get rid of the behaviour. And actually that can be done very quickly in a lot of cases. And some people on my group right now, people who are connected with me, will be previous clients. A lot of them fear of flying, because I tend to do a lot of fear of flying, and they can tell you directly just how quickly that fear can go, disappear, gone, because it happened for them. So your fear, your phobia is not going to be forever, and if you decide you want to change it, then hypnosis is one thing that can really help you do that. And I'd be so glad to take you on that journey.